Another episode of Do What You Love with Jeff Kurkjian, and I want to thank everybody for hopping in here, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on YouTube, whether you're on one of our many website partners. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, if you can see, if you're joining us in video format, I have another Kurkjian on the podcast. My very first podcast was with my dad, ESPN's Tim Kurkjian, and now I bring in another Kurkjian who is a huge, huge force to be reckoned with in the world of journalism. And I am so excited to bring in Stephen Kurkjian, who I guess is technically my third cousin, fourth. I don't really know the technical how we're related. Do you know?
Of course I know. Your great-grandfather, Tim's grandfather, and my grandfather were brothers in the old country. Tim's grandfather and my grandfather were brothers. My grandfather was Stefan Kurkjian. Tim's grandfather was Malcolm Kurkjian, and both made it out. No, Malcolm made it out safely from the horrors of the genocide of 1915. The village that they grew up in, their family grew up in, is a small village outside of the city of Erzurum in northeast Turkey, and called Kizhi, Keghi. And I went there with my father in 1992. He survived. He was born there in 1912. I won't get choked up. He survived because his mother, my grandmother, his mother, shepherded him under her skirt and walked 300 miles from that northeast village in northeast Turkey down to the French protectorate of Syria there. Took him probably 3 years, but they survived. He survived, came to America in 1920. And, his first exposure to America was probably playing catch in the fields of Watertown. There he met your grandfather, who had married a woman named Voskerchin, and she had, both them had, including your grandfather, your great grandfather, had your grandfather, had also a daughter named Margaret Kurkjian, and she was a concert pianist until she had some mental issues. I'm writing about that family, Margaret's work as a concert pianist, and her first cousin, who was also had Kurkjian blood in her, from the village in northeast Turkey, and she became Harvard world famous pianist, and became Harvard College's musical director. When I'm off my beat, but this goes to why I love these stories about how passionate I am about family. When Yo-Yo Ma took her class, he had already begun performing and selling his discs, his albums. He was at Louise Voskerchin, Margaret's first cousin. When she passed away, Yo-Yo Ma played at her memorial service and said, "I had already sold 1 million discs. I didn't hear music until I took Louise Voskerchin's class." She was that talented. So, so there is a wonderful artistic strain runs within our family. My father had it. He was an artist. But I don't have that. I call it the drop of mercurochrome. It's that little drop that God drops into those of us who are artistic.
Well,
I don't
I
I
would
have a skill.
I would beg to differ on the artistic aspect, because I believe that being a good writer is an art in itself, and I'm not just here to pump your own tires. I
Da,
think
da, da.
the way you write
Yeah.
is incredibly artistic. I mean, you're a Pulitzer
Thank you.
Prize winning journalist, for goodness sake. I mean,
I'm good at I'm good at finding out stuff, and I care and that's what I love. Finding out stuff that is hard to get, that's never been revealed, and using my skills. And part of those skills are familial in from our family, and part of them is also been from the streets that I grew up in, from the skills I learned from my boyhood. And I grew up here in Boston in a very lower middle class neighborhood called Dorchester. The Armenians had settled in another area of Boston called Watertown. And my dad, he spent his boyhood in Watertown. But when he bought his house, I moved into Boston with my mother and older sister then. They moved it to Dorchester, and that was a very tribal. Boston in the 50s, 40s, 50s, it was a very tribal city. And the Irish lived in one neighborhood, the Italians lived in the other. And but Dorchester, we had everyone. We had Jews, we had Hispanics, we had Armenians, we had Irish, Italians, certainly, we had Lithuanians. And but we all got to know each other in each other's business, and you all had to adjust to one another on the streets. And I went to a very good high school, and that high school also propelled in me the interest of getting to know people who are sitting beside you, getting to know who they are, become friendly with them, but also getting to know the city itself, the historic city of Boston, and being proud of it. And from my parentage and from my ethnic heritage of Armenian, you had a real great pride and importance of doing it well the right way, making sure everyone got a fair start, and caring about your neighbor. And when my mother went back to work after having her kids, she went back to work to a newspaper, the Boston Herald. And even though I was still a kid, I got to love the people, the women and the men that she would bring around, or we would see at our summer home. And I mean, they're profane, they smoke, they ask good questions, they really try to find out who the hell you were. Who was this little leaguer? What are you doing? What are you doing with that little league hat? And what position do you play? Lefty? What are you a lefty for?
you know
And so
what's really cool to recognize now that you've been a journalist for years is, how many kids at your age at that time would have seen these men coming by, these journalists asking all these questions, as annoying, like, ugh, I don't want to answer all this. But you found it fascinating.
That was just, just
Right.
how they talked,
The curiosity in their voice when they actually are talking to 10-year-old you. I found that when I was younger, when I would get a chance to meet, a baseball player with dad, and someone would look at me and say, "So tell me about the last musical you were in. What part did you play? And, what was it like taking your final bow?" And I would always get this energy when people would show me genuine interest, look me in the eyes, and ask me questions that I'm set up to, and I thought it was vain at one point, like, oh, I love talking about myself. No, but really, I loved the feeling that I got when people would take interest in me, and that's the feeling I'd like to give to others when I interview them now as an adult.
And growing up in Boston, like I said, was very tribal. None of us kids had anything. What we had, we went out and earned. And I was always amazed that my mother said to me, or my father said to me, go up to that office and tell them you want a summer job at the district that had summer jobs. And I went there, and it was a local state rep, and he asked me who I was, and he heard that my uncles ran the grocery store, pretty thriving grocery store, a couple of blocks away. That was the coin of the realm for him. This snot-nosed, 15, 16-year-old has uncles who run the grocery store, and people are going in and out of there every day, and I'm going out there and putting my signs in there. And that always, and it got me that summer job. In the Christmas time job, shoveling snow for the tea or delivering for the post office. So, but the other kids may not have had that. But that was, how did this flick? How did it happen because with that money, I was able to start paying my college tuition. It's how do the wheels start rolling? And I always felt that I was lucky that my uncles had the store, that my mother had the foresight to send me to the state rep's office. And then I said, well, wait a second. Why do I get it and the other kids not? There seems to be a basic unfairness about this. So I really got upset by that. And then this is the 60s, and I'm going to law school. And my mother said, well, you like to write. Why don't you try writing as a reporter? Trying fiction and having no luck with that. So I applied for a job at the State House doing reporting for an independent news service up there, covering the government. And that's where I got to learn how to ask a question to authority. And that's a big step for reporters. We're all petrified, quaking in our corduroys and penny loafers. And there's a person who's a state senator or a lieutenant governor or executive counselor, and you think you have a good question, but he doesn't have that much time, or she doesn't have that much time, and you got to parse it well, and you do it.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point too when it comes to asking that question. A lot of the times you would be in a busy press room or around other reporters, and if you're this young reporter and you're thinking, not only do I have to ask the right question to this person of leader, I've got these veteran reporters around me. If I ask something stupid, I'm going to look like an idiot.
It's all about trepidation and humiliation.
Right. And I think that's a great lesson that everybody needs to learn. I mean, whether it's asking, I'm sure you had a couple questions that flopped, or a couple of people that turned their back on you and said, I'm out of here. That was a dumb question. My dad in baseball, same thing. He's had players literally step over him because and one of my favorite stories my dad ever told, and I'm going to botch the players of it, but he was he was a reporter, not really, but he was working for a newspaper in Dallas, and it was rumored that one of the college coaches was going to be the next coach of the Patriots. So they sent my dad, They sent my dad to his house, and he said, "Hi, I'm here with the Dallas Morning News," and he said, "Hold on, I'll go get your money." He thought my dad was the paper boy. So
I heard that story. I heard that story told at the Globe.
I think he did, yeah. And that is such, because you think of that was 22-year-old Tim Kurkjian, and to where he is today. I'm 28 now, and I already have a handful of those stories of embarrassments, of mistakes, but that's what makes and rounds your career. You think back to those days of being this reporter.
I try not to think too much about that.
Right. And it's okay, I'd rather look forward to, you've spent years at the Boston Globe, investigative reporter. I have so much I want to talk to you about, because I think what you do is an act of service to community. You. I mean, I think
newspapers you thank God for newspapers, because they're filled with reporters doing the same kind of work that I was doing in the early 60s, when 68, I guess it was, when I got my first position at the Globe. And it was the time of the Vietnam War protests. And I got to be the one Globe reporter in the newsroom late in the afternoon who got sent out to cover whatever Vietnam protest was going on at the time. And I was going to law school as well. And which I loved. I was really became a sort of a legal expert as the law specialist that helped me in my reporting to the nth degree. So that when the Globe started its Spotlight team in 1970, the editor who was beginning the team tapped me on the shoulder and said, I know how enthusiastic you are as a reporter, but I also like that you know how to deconstruct complicated problems. I'm not sure where that came from. And I said it came from my law school training. Law school teaches how you to recognize what is a symptom and what is an effect, in how to find the effect, how to find the symptom, and work out from the symptom to why this really happened and which caused so many effects. So there I was working for the Globe Spotlight team in 1970, and we won a Pulitzer in 1972 for a series we had done on corruption in the city of Somerville. I really still did not know how to piece together an investigative report like I think I do now, but you learn by going out, talking to the people who are getting swamped with taxes and living in houses that that in another city would be have half as much taxes. Why are the taxes so high? Because there's so much corruption out of City Hall. Where does the corruption? How do you find the corruption? You just keep looking at invoices to see, oh my God, they're not paying attention. The city is not paying attention to the 3-bid contract rule, which is if you're going to bid on anything, the city's going to bid on anything of over $1,000. If you have a school that has $12,000 worth of broken windows, then you put that out to bid, and 5 different contractors bid on it and give you the lowest possible price. That wasn't what was happening in our beloved city of Somerville. They were giving out 12 contracts, all below $1,000, to the same person, and they didn't have to go for bids. So they went to one company, and when you saw that, you saw why it wasn't 12,000; it was 15,000.
Wow.
So the city was getting screwed time and time again.
Yeah, but I think you brought up a good point there that I definitely want to hit. Is your knowledge that you took from law school,
Yes.
and then ended up putting it into a world of journalism. And I encourage anybody who's listening right now, who listens to Do What You Love, like if you're not studying what you think you're supposed to do, or if you're not pursuing the job right now, you'll always learn something from that job,
Right.
from that studies that you can apply. Like I studied to be a broadcast journalist, a hard news reporter. And now I, play country music in Las Vegas on the radio, and I'm a morning show host. But on days like just recently, the 1 October 4-year anniversary of the shooting that happened here in Las Vegas, I am a trained, educated journalist. Right. So even though I wasn't in the city at the time, I could have somebody who was there call the show, and I can ask the questions as a trained journalism that can direct the correct story to be told, because I'm the window in which they're telling the story. It's not my story, but I have the training to be able to do that. And you mentioned the Spotlight team and all of the work you did. I think I had one question I've always wanted to ask you. When you get into investigative pieces, especially in as small of a town of Boston, and I mean that in the sense of I feel like everybody knows everybody, and when you're as connected as you are, it's a small town in a big city. Do you ever find yourself running into issue where you're the guy investigating somebody that maybe or maybe you're friends with, or in the case of the Catholic Church, you have strong Catholic values of people around you that are strong Catholics. Do you ever run into that issue of like, wow, this is my job? But
I guess I did once in a story, but this is my job. And once I was in it, maybe by 1970, if you're a political reporter, you're making friends with a lot of people. I wasn't. I had covered, like I said, the Vietnam War protests, and then I became an investigative reporter. And so, yes, I had my families and I had my neighborhood friends and high school and college friends, but it wasn't like I was a pal of anyone. And like I said, and when I go to people, I said, listen, I'm the nicest guy in the world, until I find out something that's wrong. And then I'll continue being nice to you, but I'm going to write it as hard. I'm going to investigate it as vigorously as I can, and I'm going to write it as hard as I can. What's going to be different with me, though, is I'm going to give you the extra paragraph that you're going to be able to read to your children, because I put myself into into a lot of the perpetrators' shoes. I don't see them as bad people or as bad guys. I almost see them as victims of a system that's gone awry, and they just got to keep on rolling that ball, kicking that can down the street. Keep on keeping on, because the guy who had your job before made millions, and you'll make millions. Just go along with the big boys above you, the political system above you, the corporate chiefs above you. You keep doing it, right? So what I say to them is, listen, I don't see you as a bad guy. I see you as almost as a victim. And I'd like to hear your side of that. But even if you don't give it to me, I'm going to give you an extra paragraph, because, your kids are going to go to school tomorrow. And I want to make sure that you can show the kids what paragraph in that paper says. You went to a great college. You had a tough education. You had a tough upbringing, but you succeeded in whatever, but you went awry at some point. There's a heroic scene in the movie Spotlight, which is the Catholic, the terrific movie itself about the Catholic Church. I don't come off in it as heroic as some of the others, but there is a scene that involves me. Unfortunately, the reporter is played by
I can't remember his name.
no, the girl, no, not him, woman.
I see her. Hold on. This is what Google can be for in a quick pitch.
If I only had a small device, I could hold in my hand and punch it. Rachel McAdams.
Rachel McAdams. That's it. Yeah.
Rachel McAdams is in the movie seen walking up the porch of a house in Boston, knocking on the door, and a priest coming and she's saying in effect to him, Father, we've been told you abused 3 children. Tell us why you did it. And then he goes into his justification or rationalization. But it didn't happen like that. It was me. I was up. I knocked on the door. And I had been thinking, how am I it's very hard to get people to talk, especially people who are, in the crosshairs of a case. And I knew this guy was going to, if my story was correct, this guy was going to cause this guy a lot of problems. And it did. He went to jail. I said to him, you're as much a victim of abusing, of this child abuse scandal as the kids you victimized. And I want to know why. Why? We're all good people believing in our professions. What the hell happened to you that you would do this? Abuse children? I need to know this. And I said, you have to speak, because this scandal I knew had been going on for generations. I had done investigative reporting about priests abusing kids 10 years before, and it didn't blow up then. I got 2, 3, 4 priests, put them in the paper, and I thought, well, this ends it, and it did. When the Spotlight team broke its story, because of the internet and because of power, they had legal documents that showed that this other priest had done such bad things. It was black and white. The phones ran off the handles at the Spotlight team from other victims. There were dozens of other victims calling in. So I knew when I walked up this priest's steps that there were dozens of victims calling in. This was a much bigger scandal than any of us had presumed. And I said to him, this is not a bad apple theory. There's in law, it's not systemic fraud or abuse. It's only one bad apple or 2 bad apples. And I knew this wasn't. This was something systemic. And I said, you've got to tell me why. And he said, look at me. He's about to close the door. And I had my foot in the door, so he was going to close it. He's going to have to push me away. I said, you have to tell us. You have to tell me. And he said, you want to know why? And I said, yes. And he went in, got his big folder out. He says, because I had been abused as a child. And I don't know how, as by a priest. And I don't know why I went into this profession, but I'm thinking I went into it because I somehow felt that I could do good for erasing the harm that had done to me. And I just fell into the same sort of cycle.
Well, I think in that question that you ask in wording it that way versus the Rachel McAdams film version of that way is you're giving them a chance to explain their actions and coming off as sympathetic. And you're not coming off that way.
I'm very empathetic. Like I say, I'm the best guy I know. I just
Right.
try to understand your situation. And if you tell me, you got to acknowledge, and if you tell me why in your own mind you got to doing these wrong things, it'll make it such a powerful story, but it also that you'll be on the record. You'll be addressing the system, the systemic harm, and others will be, I think, compelled by that and saying, this is not just a one-off, not just a crazed person. There's something wrong with the system that needs to be corrected. And
I think you're absolutely this is such a great lesson for anybody who's interested in the field of journalism, in the field of reporting, investigative reporting as well, is the ability not just to get the fair, give everybody a fair chance to give a quote. It's more than that. It's not, hey, care to comment?
No.
You need more than that. You need to pack a punch and an understanding and also show that you know what you're talking about as the journalist and make them comfortable enough to come, forth with information. I remember my dad told me, I think it was shortly after, at least I remember meeting you for the first time. We might have met when I was much younger. I was 11, I want to say, and I was in Boston. And my dad told me that for every corrupt person in Boston, the worst thing they could ever hear is Stephen Kurkjian is on the phone. And I love that and live by that, and I think everybody should feel that way, because what that means is with your name comes such a repertoire of just knowledge, and this is what I do. It's associated with the skill that you have crafted over the years. Your name is that. I mean, that I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's what each of us grew up with. Each of us, our ethnic grandmothers told each of us, whether they were Italian, Irish, Armenian, whatever, Haitian, it doesn't matter. Lose your arm before you lose your name. Don't lose your name. It's such a powerful thing. And for me to have, let me say, found my way into, not fallen, because I kept on thinking, I like this. This is important. This is good stuff. I'm doing good things here. That it was the right thing for me to do. And like I retired in 2008, and I'm going to write more about my Armenian heritage, which I've done somewhat about. But I went back to a story that is I care so much about, and it goes. This story also has our fingerprints, the Kurkjian and Armenian fingerprints on it, and that is the theft from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And this theft took place in March of 1990. I was in DC at the time, reporting for the Globe down there. But when I came back, I said, this artwork is extraordinary. The Rembrandt, three Rembrandts, and including two the giant Rembrandts, a Vermeer, and there's only one other Vermeer in the United States, and a Manet. I mean, 4 masterpieces, beyond question, in all now estimated at $1 billion. But to me, it's not the money that's valuable. It's the artwork itself. Why do I know this artwork? Is because my father, he gets off the boat from Marseille and In England, with tennis shoes, rubber shoes, and they see in Watertown that this gift, he has a gift of art. He knows how to paint, knows how to sketch. And I wish I had something here that showed him, but I don't, not right away. So he said they sent him off to they got him a scholarship to an art school, but every day after school, every day, because the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum is free of charge for students. It was then. He would go back in and he would study the masterpieces. So he felt a kinship, and also there's the Kurkjian family ties to this museum because of both of our cousins, Margaret Kurkjian and Louise Voskerchian. They were prodigies, 1 year apart, grew up in the same neighborhood of Watertown. And they were prodigies in the 30s and 40s, winning national contests. 1 year Louise would win, the other year Margaret would win. And after they continued their studies, they started playing at the Gardner Museum. It had weekly classical music concerts, not concerts. And you could see I could see in the clips, because the Globe would cover them. Margaret Kurkjian played this. Next week, Louise Voskerchian played it. I mean, this is, our cousins. My parents would go there on Sunday afternoons to listen to their cousins play. I mean, it had to be so affirming to them first generations, to see their cousins playing such beautiful music. And so I felt that kinship. And also I went to high school a block away from the museum. And when I used to skip out of school early, I would usually go to the other institution in Fenway, the park, rather than the museum. But I also had a love of good art.
Well, and this theft that we've been talking about,
unbelievable.
You wrote a book, Master Thieves, on
Right.
it, which is incredible. And then all of a sudden, kind of similar to you talking about the internet sensation, then Netflix comes out with this documentary that has you on it. This is a Robbery, for anybody. It just came out in 2021, and my fiance and I zipped through it so quickly. And you were featured in that documentary, and because you wrote a book on this theft. I mean, that you are the expert.
Continue to work on it. And when I hang up, I'll try to write 3 more paragraphs on my latest story.
Wow. So, I mean, you never stop writing. You mentioned 2008 you retired, but you really haven't retired at all from writing. If anything, you've probably kept busier since retirement.
Well, you didn't have to write the stuff. You didn't have to report on the stuff that you didn't care about. But I do care about the genocide, our Armenian heritage, and I truly care about helping getting this artwork back, finding out who did it, but also why it has stayed undiscovered. 13 pieces, 3 Rembrandts of Vermeer, Manet, 5 sketches by Degas. It's extraordinary where these pieces stay, why these pieces stay hidden. And my latest idea, which I gave some ink to, is to have a social media campaign around a recovery. And all of the people who listen to you, or many of the people, all of the people here in the greater Boston and New England area participated. While I was writing my book in 2014, everyone participated in something called the Ice Bucket Challenge. Ice Bucket Challenge involved pouring a bucket of ice over your head. Thankfully, it was during the summer, and to help raise money for the dreaded ALS, the Lou Gehrig disease. And it was like wildfire because of the internet. And when you did it, you challenged someone else and when you did it, you also gave contributions to ALS for ALS research. That summer of 2014, it raised in 2 months, July and August of 2014, it raised $80 million, whereas the previous summer, only 2 million had been raised. But it gave such two things it involved. It involved giving such visibility to the campaign, but also the importance of the project itself, of getting research done in this area. And I felt that same process could be used, and explanation could be used with the Gardner Museum.
Well, I think you're onto something, because you're not saying this when you're the only guy talking about it, right? You're not saying this.
Exactly. It cares for all of us.
Right. It is such a phenomenon in the Boston area. And now, with the release of your book and then the release of this documentary, everybody is fascinated.
Exactly so. Specifically your generation.
Mm-hmm. Think about how much we're obsessed with true crime.
Exactly.
And I was just, right before we went on, I had my phone on my podcast listening to updates about the Brian Laundrie, Gabby Petito, right. I was listening to Nancy Grace, who is a journalist out of nowhere. She's hysterical. I absolutely love Nancy Grace. Yep. I think she's hilarious. Former prosecutor, you can tell. Yep. But to that point, this is true crime. This is an unsolved mystery that everybody and their brother wants to figure out.
And I like to even take it to this extent. What we have to get over, especially here in Boston. There is, in these older neighborhoods, this sense of, I will spell it as well, omerta. You don't talk. You keep your mouth shut. Even if only a little piece, you don't say anything, because you could be traipsing on somebody else's ground. Well, omerta was the code of the day in the 40s and 50s and 60s when I was growing up. You put your head down, you didn't ask any questions. All right. Well, it ain't the way anymore. And what are we getting from omerta? We're getting the disappearance and the continued loss of these masterpieces that belong on the wall for us, our children, and our grandchildren. That my grandson and 2 granddaughters cannot go in and see Rembrandt's only seascape. He only painted the sea once, and that was taken off the wall of the Gardner Museum and has been gone for 30 plus years. That's ridiculous. We have to get that artwork back, because inspiration comes from it. The drop of mercuric comb. We don't know who the next Michelangelo is, or who she or he is. And it can be in your family, and they could be inspired by that painting. Get it rolling. Put in front of that artwork people who the entire public trust. Good guys, bad guys, doesn't matter. Put them in and have them say, as some bad guys have said to me, those paintings belong back on the wall. It's not good. They're hidden away. Somebody knows something. That person has to pick up the phone and say, forget omerta. They belong back on the wall. Let me help out in the search. And that sort of message, getting that message across to the public, was what the internet is about and what your generation is about.
Oh, you're absolutely right, and I can hear the passion in your voice. I don't want to make you speculate, because you are a journalist. You work in facts, not in speculation. Yeah. But from what you've said, my fiance and I have gone back and forth about these paintings. You think they're somewhere intact? Yeah,
they're somewhere intact. They're hidden away, because they can't be shown.
Right, because it's like stealing the Hope Diamond. I mean, as soon as you show it, everybody knows what it is.
Well, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney, the museum has a $10 million reward for the return of the artwork.
Somebody has to know something.
Exactly. So it's both. It's intoxicating as a mystery story, but it's also important as a part of Boston and art world's history. This is one point I'd like to make about it. In 2018, our patron saint, Tom Brady, had his game jersey stolen from the locker room in Houston after the Atlanta 28-3 comeback win. Okay. That came across all of our screens, that night. There were torchlight parades in Boston. Find Tom Brady's jersey. Tom Brady's jersey. I mean, people were really concerned about Tom. Forget Tom Brady's jersey. This is Rembrandt's only seascape that we're missing. Turn that around. We can impassion people and get people over their prejudices about speaking out by, I think, telling the importance of these paintings. And hopefully, she had them on the wall for us. I mean, she was a multimillionaire that got bitten by the artistic bug. Mrs. Gardner did. And when her husband passed away in the 1880s, she decided, we have all this artwork. We're going to build it. We wanted to build a museum. It's time to build it. And when she opened it in 1903, it was the most valuable collection of art in America. But why did she want that? Not to show off to Boston. I mean, she was a little bit of a show off anyways, but she wanted it to inspire us, the new Americans, because she knew we're becoming a world-class power in the turn of the 20th century. But we didn't have that appreciation. And she knew in buying the art as she traveled the world over, the civilizations that survived was not because of their artists, not because of their military or their economic might. It was their art that they produced. Those are the civilizations that survived. And she wanted that for the American civilization. So she had sort of a transcendent view of collecting and exhibiting art. And I think we have to go back to that, transcendent, generous view to get them back.
Well, Stephen Kurkjian, thank you so much. And as soon as you start this social media campaign, you call me and I'll help with the West Coast. And
maybe some friends out there, and Jeff, and there may be some friends and people who know a few things, so I may be able to get the story as well.
A lot of people escape to Las Vegas after committing crimes, so you never know. It could be here. Who knows? Stephen, thank you so much. I honestly, this was so much fun to be able to chat with you and your storied career and everything. I really appreciate you taking some time for the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me, and say hello to your father and their family, Jeff.
Absolutely, I will.